The storm hit just as I was locking up the clinic for the night. Rain hammered against the windows like bullets, and thunder rolled through the empty streets with a violence that made my hands shake as I turned the key. I should have gone straight home. Should have walked to my car, driven through the flooding streets, and pretended the world outside these walls didn't exist. But then I saw him. He was slumped against the brick wall beside the clinic's back entrance, rain streaming down his face, mixing pink with the blood that seeped through his white shirt. His dark hair clung to his forehead, and even unconscious, there was something about him that made my breath catch, something dangerous and beautiful and broken. I stood there for a heartbeat, keys still in my hand, watching him bleed onto the pavement. "Help me." His voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the storm like a blade. I dropped to my knees beside him, medical training overriding every instinct that screamed at me to run. "Can you stand?" His eyes opened, gray like the storm clouds above us, and just as turbulent. When he looked at me, I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been locked away for too long. I think so. He struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at whatever wounds he was hiding beneath that blood-soaked shirt. I slipped my arm around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him even through the rain and cold. "Come on, let's get you inside." The clinic was dark, except for the emergency lighting that cast long shadows across the examination room. I helped him onto the table, my hands already moving to assess the damage before my mind could catch up and remind me of all the rules I was breaking. "What happened?" I asked, cutting away his shirt with surgical scissors. "Wrong place, wrong time." His voice was steady, despite the pain I could see etched in the lines around his eyes. 3 bullet wounds, one through his shoulder, one grazing his ribs, and one that had carved a path along his forearm. None of them fatal, but all of them fresh. "Very fresh. You need a hospital," I said, reaching for gauze. His hand caught my wrist, strong fingers calloused, with a grip that spoke of violence and power. "No hospitals. These need no hospitals." Each word was measured, final, the kind of tone that brooked no argument. I stared into those storm-gray eyes and saw something that made my pulse quicken. Not just pain, but a kind of controlled desperation, like a man who knew that hospitals meant questions, and questions meant death. "Okay," I whispered, surprised by my own voice. "No hospitals." Something flickered in his expression. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. I worked in silence, cleaning and suturing with hands that had grown steady despite the chaos thundering in my chest. He watched me the entire time, never flinching, never looking away. The intensity of his gaze made heat crawl up my neck, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him to stop. "You're good at this," he said, when I finished bandaging his shoulder. "It's my job. This isn't your job." He gestured to the darkened clinic, to the fact that I was treating him off the books, in the middle of the night, while breaking 6 regulations. "This is something else." I tied off the last bandage, my fingers lingering against his skin longer than they should have. "What's your name?" For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Marco." Just Marco. Like that was all I needed to know, all I deserved to know. "I'm Elena." He repeated my name softly, like he was tasting it. "Elena." The way he said it made something flutter in my chest. "Thank you, Elena." The storm was beginning to pass, the thunder growing distant. Dawn couldn't be far away, and with it would come people, questions, complications I wasn't ready to face. "You should go," I said, stepping back from the examination table. Marco slid down from the table, moving more carefully now, but with a fluid grace that spoke of a man accustomed to pain. He pulled on what was left of his shirt, the bloodstains dark against the white fabric. "I'll pay you," he said, reaching into his jacket. "Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended. Just don't. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling that he was seeing more than I wanted him to see, reading secrets I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten them myself. "You're not like other people, Elena. You don't know me." "No," he agreed, moving toward the door. "But I'd like to." He paused at the threshold, rain still falling beyond the doorway but gentler now. When he looked back at me, there was something in his eyes that made my breath catch. If anyone comes asking about tonight, no one will. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. As if he'd already known that I was the kind of person who kept secrets. Goodbye. Elena, he disappeared into the gray dawn, leaving me alone in the examination room with bloody gauze and the lingering scent of rain and danger. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, wondering what I'd just done. When I finally cleaned up and locked the clinic properly, my hands were shaking again. But not from the cold. 3 days passed before I saw him again. 3 days of jumping at every shadow, of checking the locks twice before leaving the clinic, of lying awake at night replaying the sound of his voice saying my name. I was restocking supplies in the back room when I heard the front door chime. Something about the sound made me freeze, made every instinct I possessed suddenly alert. Elena? Marco's voice. I set down the box of bandages and walked to the front of the clinic, my heart hammering against my ribs. He stood near the reception desk, looking nothing like the bleeding stranger I'd found in the rain. His dark hair was styled now, his clothes expensive and perfectly fitted. But it was still him, still those storm gray eyes that seemed to see straight through me. "You look better," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Thanks to you." He held up a small white bag. "I brought you something." "I told you I don't want payment. It's not payment." He set the bag on the counter between us. "It's a thank you." Against my better judgment, I opened the bag. Inside was a bottle of wine, something expensive, judging by the label, and a small box wrapped in black tissue paper. "You didn't have to open it." My fingers were clumsy as I unwrapped the tissue paper. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, simple but beautiful. The kind of gift that spoke of thought and care, not obligation. "Marco, I can't. You can." He moved closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and sophisticated that made my head spin. "You saved my life, Elena. That's not something I take lightly." I looked up at him, and the intensity in his eyes made my knees weak. Anyone would have done the same. "No." His voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. "They wouldn't." He reached for the bracelet, his fingers brushing mine as he took it from the box. "May I?" I should have said no. Should have stepped back, maintained the professional distance that had kept me safe for so long. Instead, I held out my wrist. His touch was gentle as he fastened the clasp, but I could feel the strength in his hands, the same hands that had gripped my wrist 3 nights ago with such controlled power. "There," he said, not moving away. "Perfect." I stared down at the bracelet, at the way it caught the afternoon light streaming through the clinic windows. "It's beautiful." "So are you." The words hung in the air between us, charged with something dangerous and electric. When I looked up, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Elena." His voice was lower now, rougher. "There's something else." The way he said it made ice form in my stomach. "What? Some men might come looking for you, asking questions about that night?" "What kind of men?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "The kind you don't want to meet." Fear crawled up my spine, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt dangerously like excitement. "Are you in some kind of trouble, Marco?" His laugh was dark, bitter. "You could say that. What should I tell them?" "If they come?" "The truth. That you found me bleeding and patched me up. Nothing more." "And what if they don't believe me?" He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "They will." The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it made my pulse race with a mixture of fear and fascination. "You're not just anyone, are you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Something shifted in his expression, a mask sliding into place. "What makes you say that?" "The way you carry yourself, the way you talk, the way you're so sure those men will believe whatever I tell them." He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My name is Marco Santangelo." The name hit me like a physical blow. I'd lived in this city long enough to know that name, to understand what it meant. Santangelo, the The family that owned half the docks, the restaurants, the construction companies. The family that people whispered about but never crossed. Oh God. The words came out as barely a breath. Now you know. I stared at him, seeing him differently now. Not just a wounded stranger, but something else entirely. Something far more dangerous than I'd imagined. I couldn't say it. Couldn't make myself speak the words that would make this real. I'm a lot of things, Elena. His voice was gentle, almost sad. But right now, I'm just a man who owes you his life. I should have left you in the rain. Maybe. But you didn't. He reached out, his fingertips barely brushing my cheek. The touch was feather-light, but it sent electricity racing through my entire body. I'm not a good man, he said quietly, but I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Because you owe me? Because, he paused, his thumb tracing a path along my jaw. Because you matter. The honesty in his voice made something crack open in my chest. Something I'd kept locked away since David had walked out of my life, taking my trust and my ability to believe in anything good with him. This is insane, I whispered. Yes, Marco agreed. It is, but he didn't step away. Neither did I. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the clinic floor. In a few hours, I'd lock up and drive home to my empty apartment, to my careful, controlled life where nothing unexpected ever happened. But right now, with Marco Santangelo's hand on my face and danger humming in the air between us, that life felt like a prison I was finally ready to escape. What happens now? I asked. His smile was soft, almost vulnerable. Now we see what happens next. The clinic door chimed again, shattering the moment like glass. Marco's hand dropped from my face, his entire body shifting into a state of alert readiness that made my breath catch. Two men stood in the doorway, both wearing expensive suits, both carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that came from never having to explain their presence anywhere. Marco, the taller one spoke, his voice carrying a note of familiarity that made my stomach tighten. We've been looking for you. Vincent. Marco's voice was cool, controlled. I didn't know you made house calls. Vincent's gaze shifted to me, assessing. And you must be the Good Samaritan. I opened my mouth to speak, but Marco stepped slightly in front of me, a subtle movement that somehow managed to shield me without being obvious about it. Elena was just closing up, Marco said. Weren't you, Elena? The message was clear. Leave. Now. But something in me rebelled against being dismissed, against being protected like I was some fragile thing that couldn't handle whatever this was. Actually, I said, stepping out from behind Marco. I was just about to ask Mr. Santangelo about his follow-up care. Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly. Follow-up care? The bullet wounds, I said calmly, surprised by my own boldness. They need to be monitored for infection. The silence that followed was deafening. Marco's jaw was tight, his eyes promising we'd have words about this later. Vincent looked intrigued, like he'd just discovered something unexpected. Bullet wounds, Vincent repeated slowly. From the other night? 3 of them, I continued, feeling like I was walking a tightrope over an abyss. He's lucky to be alive. Indeed. Vincent's smile was sharp. Very lucky, he looked at Marco, some silent communication passing between them. Then he nodded to his companion, and they moved toward the door. Take care of those wounds, Marco, Vincent said. We'll talk soon. They left as quickly as they'd come, but the tension in the room remained thick enough to cut. What the hell was that? Marco turned to face me, his gray eyes stormy with anger and something that might have been fear. I don't know. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I couldn't let them think I was weak. Weak? He laughed, a harsh sound. Elena, you have no idea what you just did. Then tell me. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. Vincent Torino. He runs half the east side for the Morettis. The Morettis. Even I knew that name. The family that had been at war with the Santangelos for as long as anyone could remember. The men who shot you, I said, understanding beginning to dawn, among others. And I just told him. That you saved my life. That you know about the bullets. That you're involved now, whether you want to be or not. The weight of what I'd done settled over me like a stone. I sank into one of the waiting room chairs, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know." Marco knelt in front of me, his hands covering mine. "Hey, look at me." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "This isn't your fault," he said. "I should have stayed away, should have kept you out of this. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." His thumb stroked over my knuckles, a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. "Because I'm a selfish bastard who wanted to see you again. Marco, I know it's too late to take it back." "Vincent knows about you now. Knows you matter to me, do I?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Matter to you?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching my face. Then, "More than I should let you." The admission hung between us, fragile and dangerous. "What happens now?" I asked again. This time his answer was different. "Now I make sure you're safe, no matter what it takes." The promise in his voice was absolute, unbreakable. It should have reassured me. Instead, it made me wonder what kind of man Marco Santangelo really was, and what he was willing to do to keep his word. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the clinic walls in shades of gold and red. Soon it would be dark, and I'd have to decide whether to trust this dangerous man with my life. Looking into his eyes, I realized I'd already made that choice the moment I'd knelt beside him in the rain. The gunshot started. Just after midnight, I was restocking the supply closet when the first volley shattered the clinic's front windows. Glass exploded inward, glittering in the fluorescent light as I dove behind the reception desk. "Elena." Marco's voice cut through the chaos as he burst through the back entrance, gun already in his hand. "Stay down!" More shots, the sound of men shouting, car doors slamming. I pressed myself against the floor, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Marco was moving through the clinic with lethal precision, every step calculated, controlled. This wasn't the wounded man I'd patched up, or the gentle stranger who'd brought me gifts. This was someone else entirely, someone who belonged to the violence that was tearing my safe space apart. "How many?" He called out to someone. 4, maybe 5. A voice I didn't recognize. "Vincent's boys, Vincent." The name sent ice through my veins. Marco appeared beside me, dropping to his knees behind the desk. In the dim light, his face was all sharp angles and grim determination. "We have to go," he said. "Now, go where?" "Somewhere safe." He helped me to my feet, his hands steady despite the chaos around us. "Can you run?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Stay close. Don't look back." The next few minutes blurred together in a haze of adrenaline and terror. Marco led me through the clinic's back corridors to an exit I'd never used, checking corners with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. Too many times before. A black car waited in the alley, engine running. The man behind the wheel looked like he could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. "Get in," Marco said, opening the passenger door. I hesitated. Once I got in that car, there would be no going back. No pretending this was all some terrible mistake. Another burst of gunfire from the clinic made the decision for me. The car pulled away from the alley just as flames began to lick at the clinic's windows. I watched my life's work burn in the side mirror, feeling something die inside me with each passing second. "I'm sorry," Marco said quietly. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. We drove through the city in silence, winding through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, until we reached a part of town where the buildings scraped the sky and money hung in the air like expensive perfume. The penthouse was on the 42nd floor, all glass and steel and breathtaking views of a city that suddenly felt foreign. Marco's driver, Tony, he'd introduced himself with a grunt, did a sweep of the apartment, while Marco poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey. "Clean," Tony reported. "I'll be downstairs." When we were alone, the silence felt oppressive. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the light scattered below like fallen stars. "Say something," Marco said behind me. "What would you like me to say?" I turned to face him. "Thank you for saving my life. Sorry your enemies burned down my clinic? Congratulations on successfully dragging me into your war? He flinched like I'd slapped him. Elena, no. The word came out sharper than I intended. You don't get to Elena me. Not anymore. You're angry. I'm terrified. The admission tore out of me like a confession. I'm terrified and confused, and I have no idea who you really are. Marco set down his glass and moved toward me, stopping just close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. You want to know who I am? His voice was rough, raw. I'm the man who's spent the last 3 days thinking about the way you look when you concentrate. I'm the man who's been carrying your memory like a talisman against everything ugly in my world. And what else? I'm also the man who's killed 17 people. The man who owns half the judges in this city and has the other half too scared to cross me. The man whose enemies just burned down your clinic because they want to hurt me. The honesty was brutal, devastating. I wanted to run, to demand he take me home, to pretend I'd never met him. Instead, I found myself taking a step closer. Why? I asked. Why tell me? Because you deserve the truth. Because you're standing in my home and you need to know exactly what that means. And what does it mean? It means you're under my protection now. It means Vincent Torino and every other enemy I have will see you as a way to get to me. It means your old life is over. The words hit me like physical blows. My clinic, my apartment, my careful, controlled world where I was nobody special, nobody worth noticing. I want to go home, I whispered. You can't. Your apartment building is being watched. So is the hospital where you used to work? Used to work? Marco's expression was grim. I had Tony make some calls. As of tonight, you're on administrative leave pending an investigation into your activities. The last piece of my old life crumbled away. I sank onto the leather sofa, my legs finally giving out completely. This is really happening, I said to myself as much as to him. Yes. Marco sat beside me, careful to leave space between us. I know it's not fair. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I'm not sorry you're here. I looked at him, seeing the vulnerability he was trying to hide behind that controlled exterior. You should be. Maybe, but I'm not. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, beautiful and distant. In the span of a few hours, I'd lost everything I'd spent years building. My career, my independence, my safety. And somehow, sitting next to this dangerous man who'd turned my world upside down, I didn't feel as devastated as I should have. What happens now? The question was becoming a refrain between us. Now you rest. Tomorrow we figure out what comes next. And if I want to leave? Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll make sure you can. But Elena... He turned to face me fully. Leaving won't make you safe. Vincent knows about you now. Knows you matter to me. That makes you a target whether you're here or halfway around the world. So I'm trapped. You're protected. Same thing. No, he said softly. It's not. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers traced the line of my jaw with the same gentleness he'd shown in the clinic. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. I promise. Even if it costs you everything? Even then. The absolute certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in my chest, something that felt dangerously like trust. I don't understand this, I said. I don't understand you. You don't have to. Not yet. Marco, yeah? I'm scared. I know. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. But you're also brave. Braver than anyone I've ever met. How can you say that? You barely know me. I know you saved a stranger's life without asking questions. I know you stood up to Vincent Torino in your clinic today. I know you're sitting here talking to me instead of falling apart, even though your world just exploded. He was right, I realized. I should be falling apart. Should be crying or screaming or demanding answers I might not want to hear. Instead, I was calm. Centered in a way I hadn't felt in months. What's wrong with me? I asked. Marco's smile was soft, almost sad. Nothing's wrong with you, Elena. You're just finally awake. Before I could ask what he meant by that, exhaustion hit me like a wave. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me drained and hollow. Come on, Marco said, standing and offering me his hand. You need sleep. I let him lead me down a hallway lined with expensive art to a guest room that was bigger than my entire apartment. The bed looked like something from a 5-star hotel, all crisp white linens and down pillows. "There are clothes in the closet," Marco said. "Tony's sister is about your size." "Tony has a sister?" Hard to believe, I know. His smile was genuine this time, transforming his face completely. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." He turned to leave, but something made me call out to him. "Marco." He stopped, hand on the doorframe. "What is it?" "Thank you. For saving me tonight. You don't need to thank me. It's my fault you needed saving." "Maybe. But you came for me anyway." He was quiet for a moment, his back still to me. "I'll always come for you, Elena. Remember that." After he left, I stood in the middle of the luxurious room, surrounded by a stranger's things, and tried to process what my life had become in the span of a single evening. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the reality of what it meant to be connected to Marco Santangelo. Tonight, I just wanted to sleep and pretend that when I woke up, everything would make sense. But as I lay in the impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marco had been right about one thing, was finally awake, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to sleep. I found the photographs by accident. 3 days had passed since the night of the fire. 3 days of living in Marco's glass tower while he conducted his business from behind closed doors, and I tried to pretend I wasn't going slowly insane from the isolation. Tony brought me books, newspapers, anything I asked for, but what I really wanted was answers. Marco was gone most of the day, returning only for dinner and carefully neutral conversation that skirted around anything that mattered. He was protecting me, he said. From his world, from the truth, from complications I couldn't understand. But I was a nurse. I'd spent years reading between the lines of what people wouldn't tell me, and Marco's careful omissions were starting to feel less like protection and more like lies. The photographs were in his study, tucked inside a leather portfolio that had fallen behind the desk. I'd been looking for something to read, anything to break the suffocating quiet, when I'd spotted the corner of black leather peeking out from behind the mahogany. I should have left it alone. Should have respected his privacy and the invisible boundaries he'd drawn around the darker parts of his life. Instead, I pulled out the portfolio and opened it. The first photograph showed the clinic. My clinic, taken from across the street in what looked like late afternoon light. I was visible through the front window, treating an elderly patient I recognized as Mrs. Chen. The second showed me leaving through the back door, keys in my hand, looking tired after a long day. The third was taken from inside my apartment building, showing me checking my mail. There were dozens of them. Weeks' worth of surveillance photos documenting my daily routine with meticulous precision. Me at the grocery store, me having coffee at the cafe around the corner from the clinic, me sitting alone in my living room, reading. My hands were shaking as I flipped through them, each image a violation I couldn't quite process. At the bottom of the pile was something else, a manila folder labeled with my name. Inside was everything. My medical school transcripts, employment records, financial information, even my college disciplinary record from a protest I'd attended my sophomore year. But it was the final page that made my blood run cold. A detailed report on David, my ex-fiancé who'd left 3 years ago, taking half my savings and all of my trust with him. The report documented his current life in Boston, complete with photos of him with his new wife and baby. The baby he'd sworn he never wanted when he was with me. "Find everything you were looking for?" Marco's voice made me jump. I spun around to find him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How long?" My voice came out as a whisper. "How long what? How long were you watching me?" He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. 6 weeks. Before the night I found you. Yes. The admission hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the desk chair, the photographs scattered across the mahogany surface like evidence of a crime. "The bullet wounds," I said, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. "They weren't from Vincent's people, were they?" Marco's silence was answer enough. "You did it to yourself." The words felt like poison on my tongue. "You orchestrated the whole thing." "Elena, don't." I held up a hand, surprised by how steady it was. Don't you dare try to explain this away. He moved closer, and I could see the tension in every line of his body. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I stood, suddenly needing the distance. Tell me, Marco, what was it like to plan out my seduction? To manipulate me into caring about you? The bullets were real, he said quietly. I needed medical attention I couldn't get through normal channels. You were convenient? Convenient. The word tasted bitter. Is that what I am? That's what you were supposed to be. And now? Marco ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as frustration. Now it's complicated. Complicated. I laughed, a harsh sound. My life is in ruins. My clinic is burned to the ground. And I'm living in your penthouse like some kind of kept woman, because you decided I was convenient. That's not complicated, Marco. That's sociopathic. His eyes flashed with something dangerous. Watch your tone, or what? You'll have me killed? Add me to your list of 17? The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd gone too far. Marco's entire demeanor shifted, the careful control he'd maintained slipping like smoke. You think you know what kind of man I am? His voice was low, deadly. You think those people I killed were innocent? I don't know anything anymore. Then let me educate you. He moved to his desk, pulling out another folder. This one was thick, filled with police reports and newspaper clippings. David Carson, your ex-fiancé. Do you want to know why he really left? Stop. He was embezzling from the clinic where he worked. $500,000 over 2 years, skimmed from insurance payouts and patient fees. The words hit me like bullets. That's not true. Marco threw a bank statement across the desk. David's name was at the top, along with a balance that made my vision blur. He was going to pin it on you. Marco continued relentlessly. Your signature on the forms, your access codes used to process the fraudulent claims. You would have gone to prison, Elena. Lost everything. Stop, I whispered. He left because I made him leave. Because I found out what he was planning and gave him a choice. Disappear or face the consequences. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the desk, fighting to stay upright as everything I thought I knew crumbled around me. Why? The question came out broken, desperate. Why would you protect me? Because even then you mattered. I was a stranger. You were... He paused, searching for words. You were the first good thing I'd seen in years. Pure in a way I'd forgotten existed, so you decided to destroy it. I decided to save it, to save you. I stared at him. This man who'd turned my world inside out, who'd orchestrated chaos and called it salvation. By lying to me, by manipulating me, by any means necessary. The honesty in his voice was devastating. No apologies, no excuses. Just the cold truth of a man who'd decided my fate without my consent. I hate you, I said. I know. I hate that you watched me. I hate that you planned this. I hate that you made me care about you when none of it was real. It's real now, is it? I looked down at the photographs, at the evidence of his meticulous planning. How do I know anything about you is real? Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to a wall safe I hadn't noticed, hidden behind a painting of the Venetian canals. His hands were steady as he worked the combination, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He returned with a small velvet box, setting it on the desk beside the scattered photographs. My mother's ring, he said simply. She died when I was 12. Lung cancer. I didn't touch the box, but I could see the ring inside. A simple band with a small diamond, worn thin by years of wear. She was a nurse, Marco continued. Worked double shifts at St. Mary's to keep food on the table after my father died. She used to say that healing people was the closest thing to divine grace she'd ever experienced. His voice was different now, stripped of its usual control, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. The night I found out about David, I was supposed to kill him. Vincent had put a price on his head for some unrelated business. But when I saw you, when I saw what losing him was doing to you, you let him live. I let him live, gave him money to disappear and never come back. Marco picked up one of the surveillance photos, the one of me sitting alone in my living room. I told myself I was just being thorough, that watching you was part of the job, making sure David stayed gone. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. He set the photo down gently, like it was precious. You were supposed to be a job, Elena. A loose end to tie up and forget about. Instead, you became, what? Everything. The word hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't sure I was ready to accept. I don't believe you, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Then don't. Marco moved to the window, staring out at the city spread below. Believe the evidence. Believe what you see. What I see is a man who lies as easily as breathing. What you should see is a man who's never brought a woman to his home, who's never shared his mother's story with anyone, who's never cared enough about someone to make himself vulnerable like this. I wanted to argue, to maintain my anger and righteous indignation. But looking at him silhouetted against the city lights, I could see the truth in the set of his shoulders, the careful distance he'd put between us. He was afraid. Marco Santangelo, the man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, was terrified of what I might say next. The bullets, I said finally. Were they really necessary? I needed a reason to be there, a reason for you to help me. You could have just asked. Could I? He turned back to me. Would you have agreed to treat a stranger's gunshot wounds off the books? Would you have let me into your life without the crisis, without the drama? I opened my mouth to say yes, then closed it. Because the truth was, I probably wouldn't have. The old Elena, the careful one who'd built walls around her heart and never took risks, would have called the police and walked away. I hate that you're right, I said. I hate that I had to be. We stared at each other across the room, the weight of all the lies and truths between us making the air thick and hard to breathe. What now? I asked, the question taking on new meaning in light of everything I'd learned. Now you decide. Decide what? Whether you can forgive me. Whether this, us, is worth salvaging despite how it started. Marco moved back to the desk, closing the portfolio of photographs and sliding it into a drawer. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I manipulated you and lied to you and turned your life upside down for selfish reasons. But I love you, Elena. I love your strength and your compassion, and the way you see good in places where others only see darkness. I love that you saved me not because you had to, but because you couldn't do anything else. The words were a confession and a plea wrapped in one. I could see the truth of them in his eyes, in the way his hands trembled slightly as he waited for my response. I don't know if I can trust you, I said. I know. I don't know if I can forgive this. I know that too. But I don't know if I can walk away either. Something shifted in his expression, hope flickering like a candle in the dark. Then don't, he said simply. Stay, figure it out. Give us a chance to be real. I looked at the man who'd orchestrated my downfall and called it salvation, who'd lied to me about everything except the way he felt. The smart thing would be to leave, to demand he find me somewhere safe to start over. But I'd been doing the smart thing my whole life, and where had it gotten me? Alone in a sterile apartment, treating other people's pain while ignoring my own. Building walls so high I'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to be brave. If we do this, I said. If we try, it has to be different. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more deciding what's best for me without asking. Agreed. And I want to understand your world. Really understand it. Not the sanitized version you think I can handle. Marco's jaw tightened. Elena, some things... No, I cut him off. All of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. If I'm going to be part of your life, I need to know what that means. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing my words. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. You might not like what you learn. I might not. But I'd rather hate you for who you really are than love you for who you're pretending to be. Marco nodded slowly, acceptance and resignation warring in his expression. Okay, but we do this gradually. There are things, people, that could hurt you just by knowing they exist. I trust your judgment. Do you? The question caught me off guard. Did I trust him? After everything, after all the lies and manipulation? Looking at him now, seeing the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide, I realized that I did. Not blindly, not completely, but enough to take this leap of faith. I'm choosing to, I said. Something in Marco's face cracked open, relief and gratitude spilling out like light. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Ask me again in a few months when you're tired of me questioning everything you do. His smile was soft, genuine. I look forward to it. The tension in the room began to ease, though the weight of everything we'd revealed still hung between us. We had a long way to go, trust to rebuild, truths to navigate, but for the first time since I'd found those photographs, I felt like we might actually make it. I have one more question, I said. What's that? The night of the fire, when Vincent's people came to the clinic, did you know they were coming? Marco's expression shuddered slightly. Yes. Did you let them come? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I knew about the plan. I could have stopped it. But you didn't. No, I didn't. The admission was another blow, but somehow less devastating than it should have been. Maybe because I was finally understanding the complexities of the world Marco inhabited, where protection sometimes looked like destruction. Why? Because Vincent needed to think he'd won something. Because the clinic was evidence of our connection, and evidence could be used against both of us. Because... He paused. Because I needed you to see that your old life was over. That staying in it would get you killed. So you let him burn it down. I let him burn it down, Marco confirmed. But I made sure you weren't in it. It was horrible and manipulative and probably saved my life. The contradiction was giving me a headache. This is what you meant, isn't it? I asked. When you said I might not like what I learned? This is just the beginning. I nodded, absorbing that. Then we'd better get started. Marco moved toward me slowly, giving me time to step away. When I didn't, he reached for my hands, his fingers intertwining with mine. Are you sure about this? He asked. Really sure? Because once you're in, Elena, there's no going back. Not ever. I haven't been able to go back since the moment I found you bleeding in the rain, I said. I just didn't realize it until now. He brought our joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. Then welcome to my world, Elena Rossi. Try not to let it destroy you. I won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. But I might just change it a little. Marco's laugh was rich and warm and full of promise. I'm counting on it. Outside, the city sparkled in the darkness. Beautiful and dangerous and full of possibilities I was only beginning to understand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new truths to navigate, new lines to walk between love and loyalty, between healing and harm. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, and that was worth any price I might have to pay. The warehouse smelled of blood and diesel fuel. 2 weeks had passed since my conversation with Marco in his study. 2 weeks of gradual introduction to a world I'd never imagined existed in the shadows of the city I'd called home. I'd met his lieutenants, learned the names of his enemies, begun to understand the intricate web of loyalty and fear that held his empire together. But understanding it in theory was very different from experiencing it firsthand. Elena, I need you to focus. Marco's voice cut through my shock as I stared at the 3 men lying on makeshift gurneys in the middle of the cavernous space. Can you help them? The man closest to me had a bullet wound in his shoulder, blood seeping through the torn fabric of his shirt. Another had taken shrapnel to the leg, metal fragments glinting in the harsh light of the industrial fixtures hanging from the ceiling. The third... This one needs a hospital, I said, dropping to my knees beside him. The bullet had caught him in the abdomen, and I could see the telltale signs of internal bleeding. No hospitals. Marco's voice was flat, final. Marco, he's going to die without surgery. Then save him here. I looked up at him, seeing a stranger in the harsh warehouse light. Gone was the gentle man who'd brought me coffee this morning, who'd kissed me goodbye like we were a normal couple living a normal life. This was the other Marco, the one who commanded through violence and expected absolute obedience. I can't perform surgery in a warehouse, I said. I don't have the equipment, the sterile environment. You have what's here. Make it work. Around us, his men watched silently, their faces grim, waiting to see if their leader's woman was really one of them, or just another civilian who'd fold under pressure. Tony appeared at my side with a duffel bag full of medical supplies. "This is what we could get on short notice," he said. I unzipped the bag, my hands moving automatically to inventory what was available. Antibiotics, sutures, morphine, basic surgical instruments, not nearly enough for what I needed to do, but maybe... "I need more light," I said, "and clean water. Lots of it." Marco snapped his fingers, and men scattered to fulfill my requests. Within minutes, additional lamps had been arranged around my makeshift operating table, and someone had found a garden hose to provide water. "This is insane," I muttered, pulling on surgical gloves. "This is Tuesday night," Tony said grimly. I looked at the wounded man, barely 20, with kind eyes and a mother's cross hanging around his neck, and made my choice. For the next 3 hours, I worked with a focus I'd never experienced before. Every instinct I possessed screamed that this was impossible, that I was going to lose him, but I shut out the voice of doubt and let my training take over. Marco stayed close, not speaking but somehow lending me strength through his presence. When I needed an extra pair of hands, he was there. When I needed someone to hold a light steady, he did it without question. The warehouse around us faded away until there was nothing but the work. The delicate dance of surgery that I'd performed hundreds of times in sterile hospital conditions, but never like this. Never with gunfire echoing from the street outside, and the constant knowledge that this man's life hung in the balance. "Got it," I breathed, finally extracting the bullet from his abdomen. "Tony, hand me the sutures." The rest was routine, closing him up, monitoring his vitals, administering antibiotics to ward off infection. As dawn light began to filter through the warehouse windows, his pulse was steady and his breathing regular. "He's going to make it," I said, pulling off my gloves. The silence that followed was deafening. Then one of Marco's men started to clap, and the others joined in, their applause echoing off the concrete walls. "Damn, Doc," the man with the shoulder wound said, grinning despite his pain. "Remind me to get shot more often." "Don't you dare," I said, but I was smiling too. Marco appeared beside me with a bottle of water and a clean towel. "You did good," he said quietly. "I can't believe it worked." "I can." He touched my face gently, his thumb tracing the line of my cheek. "You're extraordinary, Elena. I've always known that." Around us, his men were cleaning up, preparing to move the wounded to a safe house where they could recover. The immediate crisis was over, but I could see in Marco's face that something had shifted. "What is it?" I asked. "The attack tonight," he said. "It wasn't random. Someone leaked our location. The implications hit me like ice water. You have a traitor." "Yeah. And until I find out who, nowhere is safe." "What does that mean?" Marco's expression was grim. "It means we go to ground. All of us. Within an hour, we were on the move again." The safe house was a converted loft in an industrial district, all exposed brick and steel beams. Not as luxurious as Marco's penthouse, but secure. As his men settled in for what looked like an extended stay, Marco pulled me aside. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Are you having second thoughts?" "About this, about us?" The question caught me off guard. "Why would you ask that?" "Because tonight was brutal. Because you just performed surgery in a warehouse while people were shooting at us. Because this is what your life looks like now, and I need to know if you can handle it." I thought about the question seriously, replaying the events of the night, the fear, the adrenaline, the absolute focus required to save a life under impossible conditions. "I should be terrified," I said finally. "I should be demanding you take me somewhere safe and walk away from all of this. But I've never felt more alive. When I was working on him, when his life was in my hands, and I was the only thing standing between him and death. Marco, that's what I became a nurse for. That feeling, that purpose, even under these circumstances. Especially under these circumstances." I touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "In a hospital, I'm just one of many. Here with your people, I'm essential. What I do matters in a way it never has before." Something shifted in Marco's expression, relief and something deeper. "You're not just my woman," he said. "You're becoming one of us." Is that what you want? It's what I've been hoping for since the day I met you. Before I could respond, Tony burst into the room. Boss, we got a problem. Marco's entire demeanor changed instantly. What kind of problem? The kind with badges and warrants. Feds? Local, but they're asking the right questions. Someone's been talking. Marco cursed under his breath. How much time do we have? Maybe an hour if we're lucky. Then we move now. Marco turned to me. Elena, I need you to make a choice. What kind of choice? The kind that defines who you are and where your loyalties lie. His words sent ice through my veins. I don't understand. There's a back way out of here, through the old subway tunnels. My men can get you out, set you up with a new identity, money to start over wherever you want. And the alternative? You stay with me. Face whatever comes next as my partner. Not my responsibility. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a physical force. One path led to safety, anonymity, a chance to rebuild the quiet life I'd lost. The other led into darkness I couldn't even imagine, with a man who'd already turned my world upside down more times than I could count. If I stay, I said. What does that mean? Really? It means you're all in. No more protection from the ugly parts of what I do. No more carefully managed distance from the violence and the choices that keep us alive. And if the police come, then we face them together, whatever the consequences. I looked around the safe house, at the men who'd accepted me as one of their own, who'd clapped when I'd saved their friend's life. Then I looked at Marco, seeing the vulnerability he was trying to hide behind his controlled exterior. He was asking me to choose him. Not just the man I'd fallen in love with, but the life that came with him. All of it, without reservation or conditions. Elena, he said quietly, you don't have to. I choose you, I said, cutting him off. I choose this. I choose us. The smile that spread across Marco's face was brilliant, transforming him completely. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He kissed me then, hard and desperate and full of promise. When we broke apart, I could see tears in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered against my lips. Don't thank me yet, I said, echoing words I'd spoken weeks ago. Ask me again when we're sitting in a jail cell. If we end up in a jail cell, at least we'll be together. Together, I agreed. Whatever comes next. Marco's radio crackled to life. Boss, we got movement. 3 blocks out and closing. Time to go, Marco said, but he didn't move away from me. Last chance, Elena. You can still take that tunnel. I reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble under my palm. Where you go, I go. That's what this means, right? Being your partner? That's exactly what it means. Then let's go face whatever's coming. As we prepared to leave the safe house, I caught sight of myself in a cracked mirror hanging near the door. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, blood still staining my clothes from the surgery, eyes bright with an intensity I'd never seen before. This wasn't the careful, controlled Elena who'd built walls around her heart and never took risks. This was someone new, someone brave enough to choose love over safety, purpose over comfort, someone who'd finally found where she belonged. Marco took my hand as we headed for the stairs, our fingers intertwining naturally. Behind us, his men fell into formation, ready to follow their leader into whatever came next. No regrets? He asked one last time. I thought about my old life, my quiet apartment, my predictable routines. Then I thought about the man whose life I'd saved tonight, about the feeling of being essential, needed, alive. No regrets, I said. Let's go. The sound of sirens was growing closer, but I wasn't afraid. Whatever was waiting for us out there, we'd face it together, and that was enough. The interrogation room was smaller than I'd expected. Detective Morrison, a woman about my age with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, sat across from me at a metal table that had seen better decades. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unflattering shadows. So, Elena, she said, consulting her notes, you want to tell me how a nice nurse from the suburbs ends up performing surgery in an abandoned warehouse? I kept my expression neutral, remembering Marco's coaching from the car ride to the station. Tell the truth when you can, deflect when you can't, and never volunteer information they don't already have. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, I said. That seems to happen to you a lot lately. Detective Morrison spread a series of photographs across the table. Crime scene photos from the clinic fire, surveillance footage from the warehouse, images of me entering and leaving Marco's building. Your clinic burns down under mysterious circumstances. A week later, you're living with Marco Santangelo. 2 weeks after that, you're treating gunshot wounds in what we're pretty sure is a Santangelo safe house. She leaned back in her chair. That's a hell of a coincidence. Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. No, sometimes life gets derailed by poor choices. Morrison picked up one of the photos. Me walking into the warehouse, medical bag in hand. Help me understand yours. I stared at the photograph, seeing myself through her eyes. A woman who'd thrown away everything for a man who lived outside the law. It should have filled me with shame, regret, the desire to explain that it wasn't what it looked like. Instead, I felt only calm certainty. I don't think you'd understand, I said. Try me. Detective Morrison, have you ever been in love? The question clearly wasn't what she'd expected. Her professional mask slipped slightly, revealing something almost human underneath. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. Have you ever cared about someone so much that their world became your world? Their problems became your problems? Their people became your people? That's not love, Morrison said. That's codependency. Maybe. Or maybe it's what happens when you finally find where you belong. Morrison was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Is that what you think? That you belong in Marco Santangelo's world? I know I do, even knowing what he is, what he's done, especially knowing what he is. The honesty in my voice seemed to surprise her. She shuffled through her papers, pulling out another folder. Elena, your record is spotless. Top of your class in nursing school. Exemplary employment history, no criminal background, not even a parking ticket. She looked up at me. You're not a criminal. You don't belong in this world. 3 months ago, I would have agreed with you. And now I know that sometimes the person you're supposed to be isn't the person you were born to be. Morrison leaned forward. What if I told you we could protect you, get you out of this situation, set you up with a new identity, a fresh start? I'd ask why you think I need protecting. Because Marco Santangelo is a dangerous man. Because his enemies are your enemies now. Because this story doesn't end well for people like you. People like me? Good people. Innocent people. I almost laughed. Detective, I haven't been innocent since the night I decided to treat a stranger's gunshot wounds off the books. I stopped being good the moment I chose to love a man like Marco. I'm not a victim here. I'm a willing participant. In what? In whatever comes next. Morrison sat back, frustration clear on her face. You're protecting him. I'm protecting us. There is no us, Elena. There's him, and there's what he's dragged you into. Those are two very different things, are they? I thought about the night in the warehouse, about the way Marco had stayed beside me while I operated, about the trust in his men's eyes when they looked at me. Because it feels like the same thing to me. That's because you're in too deep to see clearly. Or because you're on the outside looking in. Morrison closed the folder with more force than necessary. We know about the warehouse. We know about the safe houses. We know about the money laundering operation running through the construction company. I kept my expression carefully blank, though my heart rate spiked. They knew more than Marco had anticipated. But what we don't know, Morrison continued, is where Marco is now, where he's planning to surface next, what his next move is going to be. And you think I know? I think you're the only person he trusts completely. I think he tells you things he doesn't tell anyone else. She wasn't wrong. Over the past few weeks, Marco had begun including me in conversations that would have been unthinkable when we first met. Strategy discussions, personnel decisions, financial planning. I'd become his confidant as much as his lover. Even if that were true, I said. Why would I tell you? Because cooperating with this investigation is the only way you're walking out of here as a free woman. The threat hung in the air between us, clear and unmistakable. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked. "Full immunity, witness protection if necessary, a chance to start over. In exchange for information, locations, enough to bring down the Sant'Angelo organization." I was quiet for a long moment, pretending to consider the offer. In truth, there was nothing to consider. I'd made my choice weeks ago in that safe house, when I'd chosen to stay with Marco instead of taking the tunnel to safety. "I need time to think," I said finally. "You have 24 hours. Morrison stood, gathering her files. At the door, she paused. "Elena, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen women like you before. Smart, successful, convinced they can save a dangerous man through the power of love. It never ends well. Maybe I'm different. That's what they all say." After she left, I sat alone in the interrogation room, staring at the scarred metal table and thinking about the choice ahead of me. 24 hours to decide between freedom and loyalty, between safety and love. It wasn't really a choice at all. A uniformed officer came to escort me back to holding, where I'd spend the night until my lawyer, Marco's lawyer, could arrange bail. As we walked through the corridors of the police station, I caught glimpses of other lives intersecting with the justice system. Domestic violence victims giving statements, drug dealers being processed, families waiting anxiously for news of arrested loved ones. This was the world I was choosing. Not just Marco's world of power and violence, but this world of consequences and complications, of midnight phone calls and legal maneuvering and the constant knowledge that everything could fall apart at any moment. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt oddly at peace. My cell was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a tiny window that looked out onto the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Marco was dealing with his own version of this crisis, probably coordinating with lawyers and lieutenants, planning his next move. I wondered if he was thinking about me, if he was second-guessing his decision to let me stay when he could have sent me away to safety. I wondered if he regretted bringing me into his world, now that the full weight of those consequences was crashing down around us. But even if he did, it wouldn't change anything. The choice was mine now, and I'd already made it. I lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the woman I'd been just 3 months ago. Safe, careful, living a life of quiet desperation behind walls I'd built to keep the world at bay. That woman felt like a stranger now. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever Detective Morrison threatened or promised, I wouldn't betray Marco. Wouldn't betray the life we'd built together, complicated and dangerous as it was. Because for the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I belonged, and that was worth any price they wanted me to pay. The phone call came at 3 a.m. "Elena?" Marco's voice was rough, strained with exhaustion, and something that might have been fear. "I'm here," I said, gripping the receiver in the jail's phone booth. Around me, the holding area was quiet except for the soft breathing of sleeping inmates. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Just tired." "Good. That's good." He was quiet for a moment. "Elena, I'm going to get you out of this. Whatever it takes. Marco, listen to me. I'm not telling them anything. You don't have to protect me. Not at the cost of your freedom." "I'm not protecting you," I said. "I'm protecting us." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I love you," he said, "more than I've ever loved anything or anyone. You know that, right?" "I know. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." "If something happens," he continued, "Tony has instructions. Money, documents, everything you need to disappear. Marco, do promise me." "Elena, promise me you'll take care of yourself." I closed my eyes, feeling tears I'd been holding back all day finally spill over. "I promise, but only if you promise me something in return. Anything. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Don't trade yourself for me. Don't make some grand gesture that gets you killed. Elena, promise me. Marco, whatever Morrison is offering, whatever deal she's pushing, we face this together or not at all." He was quiet for so long I thought the connection had been lost. Then, together. Together, I agreed. I have to go. The lawyer will be there in the morning to handle bail. Okay. Elena? Yeah, thank you. For choosing this. For choosing me. Thank you for being worth choosing. The line went dead, leaving me alone in the phone booth with the receiver in my hand and tears on my face. Back in my cell, I lay awake until dawn, thinking about choices and consequences, about the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. Somewhere in the distance, the city was waking up. People going to jobs they hated, living lives of quiet desperation, playing it safe behind walls that kept out both danger and joy. I'd been one of those people once. Now I couldn't imagine going back. When the guard came to release me the next morning, I walked out of that jail cell as someone new. Someone who'd been tested and had chosen love over safety, loyalty over comfort, truth over convenience. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The clinic felt like a tomb. 6 months had passed since that night in the police station. 6 months of legal maneuvering and carefully orchestrated plea bargains that had somehow left both Marco and me free. The prosecutors had wanted him more than they'd wanted me, and my lawyer, the best money could buy, had negotiated a deal that kept me out of prison in exchange for community, service, and a promise to stay away from anything remotely connected to organized crime. As if love came with geographic restrictions. The insurance settlement had been enough to rebuild, but I'd moved the clinic to a different neighborhood, somewhere the ghosts of that first night couldn't follow me. The new space was smaller, more modest, but it was mine, or it had been, until this morning. The letter from the state medical board sat on my desk like a death sentence. Formal language that boiled down to a simple truth. My nursing license was under review pending investigation into my association with known criminal elements. Association. As if falling in love was a business relationship, I'd known this day would come eventually. The deal I'd made had kept me out of prison, but it couldn't protect me from the slow-moving machinery of professional consequences. Someone had decided I was a liability, a risk that needed to be managed. The irony was that I'd never been a better nurse than I was now. The skills I'd learned in Marco's world, working under pressure, making life-or-death decisions with limited resources, staying calm in chaos, had made me more effective, more confident, more capable of actually saving lives. But saving lives didn't matter if you'd saved the wrong ones. The door chimed, and I looked up expecting to see Mrs. Chen or one of my other regular patients. Instead, Detective Morrison walked in, looking older and more tired than she had during my interrogation. "Hello, Elena." "Detective." I didn't get up from behind my desk. "If you're here to arrest me again, you're going to be disappointed. I haven't done anything illegal lately." "Relax. This isn't official business." She sat down in one of the patient chairs, her movements careful and deliberate. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of too many cases and not enough wins. "Then what is it? A conversation between two women who've both been screwed over by the system." That wasn't what I'd expected to hear. "I'm sorry?" Morrison pulled out a manila folder, setting it on my desk with a heavy thud. Marco Santangelo's file, everything we had on him, everything we were building toward. Had? The case is closed. Orders from above. Seems someone decided the Santangelo organization was no longer a priority target. I stared at the folder, not daring to touch it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 3 months of investigation, dozens of witness interviews, and enough evidence to put half the family away for life just got buried because someone with more power than me decided it wasn't worth pursuing. Why are you telling me this?" Morrison leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "Because you chose him. Because you threw away everything for love. And I wanted you to know that the man you sacrificed your career for has enough influence to make federal cases disappear." The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought about the nights Marco had been working late, the phone calls that stopped when I entered the room, the careful way he'd avoided talking about the legal proceedings. "You think he bought his way out?" I said. "I think Marco Santangelo has never met a problem he couldn't solve with money or violence, and I think you've been played by an expert." I looked down at the folder, my hands trembling slightly. Everything I thought I knew about the past 6 months, about Marco's legal troubles and the way they'd been resolved, suddenly felt suspect. "Elena," Morrison said gently, There's something else. She pulled out another photograph, this one recent. Marco entering a restaurant downtown, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, blonde, wearing the kind of expensive clothes that spoke of old money and older connections. This was taken last week, Morrison said. Her name is Catherine Torino. Vincent's daughter. The world tilted sideways. Vincent Torino, the man whose people had burned down my clinic, whose family had been at war with the Santangelos for decades. And Marco was, what? Making peace? Making deals? Making me irrelevant. I should go, Morrison said, standing. But Elena, whatever you decide to do with this information, be careful. Men like Marco Santangelo don't like loose ends. After she left, I sat alone in my clinic, staring at the photographs and documents spread across my desk. Evidence of a life I thought I understood. Proof that the man I'd given up everything for might have been playing a longer game than I'd realized. My phone buzzed. A text from Marco. Dinner tonight? Miss you. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about all the things we'd never talked about, all the questions I'd never asked because I'd been afraid of the answers. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid. I closed the clinic early and drove to Marco's penthouse, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. The security guard in the lobby nodded to me familiarly. I'd become a regular fixture over the past months, the boss's woman who belonged in this world of marble and money. But did I really belong here? Or was I just another carefully managed asset in a game I'd never fully understood? Marco was waiting for me in his study, a glass of wine already poured. That soft smile that had become as familiar as breathing, lighting up his face when he saw me. You're early, he said. Moving to kiss me. I stepped back, putting space between us. We need to talk. Something in my tone must have warned him. His expression shifted, becoming more guarded. What's wrong? Detective Morrison came to see me today. Marco's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What did she want? To tell me your case was closed, to show me some interesting photographs. I pulled out the picture of him with Catherine Torino, setting it on his desk, to ask me if I knew I was being played. Marco stared at the photograph for a long moment, then looked up at me. It's not what it looks like. Then what is it? Business. An alliance that benefits both families. An alliance. The word tasted bitter. With the daughter of the man who tried to kill you. The man who burned down my clinic. Elena, how long? I cut him off. How long have you been negotiating with the Torinos? Marco moved to his bar cart, pouring himself 3 fingers of whiskey. His hands were steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Since the night of the warehouse, he said finally. The warehouse where your men were shot, where I performed surgery on a concrete floor while people tried to kill us. Yes. The simple confirmation hit me harder than any elaborate lie could have. So while I was choosing to stay with you, choosing your world over my safety, you were already planning to make peace with your enemies. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, Marco. Tell me why you let me think we were at war when you were already negotiating the peace. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his glass. When he looked up, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something that looked almost like shame. Because I needed you to choose, he said simply. Choose what? Me, this life. Our future. He set down the glass, moving closer. Elena, everything I did, every choice I made, was about keeping you safe while building something permanent between us. By lying to me. By protecting you from complications you couldn't understand. Like your engagement to Catherine Torino? The words hung in the air like a slap. Marco's face went white, and I knew I'd guessed right. How long? I asked again. The engagement is political, symbolic. It doesn't mean, how long, Marco? 2 months, 2 months. 2 months of dinners and conversations and making love while he planned a future that didn't include me. 2 months of letting me believe I was his partner while treating me like a carefully managed complication. I think I'm going to be sick, I said. Elena, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been engaged to another woman for 2 months? That you've been using me as cover while you negotiated with the people who tried to kill us? That everything you told me about trust and partnership was a lie? It wasn't a lie. Marco's voice was desperate now, the careful control he maintained slipping away. What we have is real. The engagement is just what? Just business? Just politics? Just something you forgot to mention to the woman who gave up her entire life for you? I was crying now, angry tears that I wiped away with the back of my hand. You know what the worst part is? I actually thought we were equals. I thought we were building something together. We are. No. I shook my head. We're not. You're building something and I'm just... What? A convenient nurse who keeps your secrets and warms your bed when you're not playing politics with your fiancé? That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, a harsh sound. Marco, fair would have been telling me the truth. Fair would have been letting me make my choices with complete information. Fair would have been treating me like a partner instead of a possession. I was trying to protect you. From what? The truth? Reality? The knowledge that the man I love has been lying to me for months. Marco ran a hand through his hair, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Elena, the engagement doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything. No, it doesn't. He moved closer, reaching for my hands. I love you. That hasn't changed. That will never change. I pulled away from his touch. But you're going to marry her. It's a business arrangement, a way to end decades of bloodshed between our families. And what am I? You're the woman I love, the woman I want to spend my life with. As your mistress. The word hung between us like a curse. Marco's face crumpled, and I knew I'd articulated the truth he hadn't been brave enough to speak. It doesn't have to be like that, he said quietly. Then how does it have to be? You marry Catherine for politics and keep me on the side for love? I give up my license, my career, my independence to be your secret? Your consolation prize? You're not a consolation prize. You're everything. Then choose me. The words came out before I could stop them, raw and desperate and final. Choose me, Marco. Cancel the engagement. Tell the Torinos to find another way to make peace. Choose the woman you claim to love over the alliance that serves your business. Marco stared at me, and in his silence, I had my answer. You can't, I said, the words barely a whisper. You can't choose me. Elena, it's not that simple. It is that simple. Either I matter enough to fight for, or I don't. Either what we have is worth sacrificing for, or it's not. You don't understand the implications. I understand perfectly. I moved toward the door, suddenly needing space, air, distance from this conversation that was tearing my heart apart. I understand that when it comes down to it, I'm not worth the risk. That's not true, isn't it? I paused at the door, looking back at him. If the situations were reversed, if someone demanded I choose between you and everything else I'd built, what do you think I'd choose? Marco was quiet, and that silence was more devastating than any words could have been. I thought so, I said. Elena, wait, please. But I was already walking away, my feet carrying me toward the elevator, toward the street, toward whatever came next in a life I'd have to rebuild from nothing, again, behind me. I heard Marco call my name, heard his footsteps on the marble floor, but I didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around, because if I looked at him again, if I saw the pain in his eyes that I knew matched my own, I might forgive him. Might accept the role he was offering me, the half-life in the shadows of his real world. And I'd finally learned that I deserved better than that. The elevator doors closed between us, cutting off his voice, his presence, the life we'd built together. As the numbers counted down toward the lobby, I felt something break inside me, something that had been fragile and precious and now lay in pieces. But underneath the heartbreak was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For 6 months, I'd been living in Marco's world, playing by his rules, accepting his version of truth and love and partnership. Now, for the first time since that night in the rain, I was free to choose my own path, even if that path led away from the only man I'd ever truly loved. The city stretched out before me as I walked through the lobby and into the night. Full of possibilities, I was finally free to explore. Somewhere out there was a future I'd have to build alone, a life that belonged entirely to me. It would be harder than staying, lonelier than accepting Marco's terms, but it would be mine. And maybe, after everything, that was enough. The knocking started just after midnight. I'd been back in my apartment for 3 weeks, trying to rebuild a life from the ashes of the one I'd walked away from. The state medical board had suspended my license pending a full investigation, so I'd been working at a free clinic downtown, treating people who couldn't afford to care about my complicated past. It was honest work, necessary work, but it felt like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit anymore. After months in Marco's world, after the intensity and purpose I'd found there, regular nursing felt small, but it was mine. Clean. Uncomplicated by lies and divided loyalties and midnight. Phone calls that might be threats or promises depending on the day. The knocking was persistent, desperate. Not the measured rap of someone making a social call, but the urgent hammering of someone who needed something right now. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman I didn't recognize, maybe 25, with dark hair and frightened eyes. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and her expensive clothes were torn. Every instinct told me not to open the door, not to get involved. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, and the scars were still too fresh. But she knocked again, and something in the sound broke through my defenses. "Please," she called through the door. "I know you help people. I know you used to help Marco." Marco. Even hearing his name was like a physical blow. I opened the door, keeping the chain latch engaged. "What do you want?" "My name is Catherine Torino," she said, and my world tilted sideways. Catherine, Marco's fiancée, the woman who'd replaced me in his carefully orchestrated future. "I need your help," she continued. "I'm hurt and I can't go to a hospital. The last questions I can't answer." I stared at her through the crack in the door, seeing the desperation in her eyes, the way she was holding her left arm against her body like it might be broken. The smart thing would be to close the door, to tell her to find someone else, some other nurse to patch her up and send her back to the life that should have been mine. Instead, I found myself undoing the chain latch. "Come in," I said, "but make it quick." Catherine stumbled into my living room, and I could see the full extent of her injuries. The cut on her forehead was superficial, but her arm was definitely broken, and she was moving like someone with bruised ribs. "What happened to you?" I asked, guiding her to the couch. "Vincent happened to me." Vincent, her father, the man Marco was making peace with through their engagement. "Your father did this?" Catherine's laugh was bitter, painful. "My father does a lot of things people don't expect." I went to get my medical bag, the one I'd kept from my time with Marco, fully stocked and ready for emergencies I'd hoped would never come. As I worked, cleaning her wounds, setting her arm in a temporary splint, Catherine talked. "He wants me to marry Marco," she said. "Wants the alliance, the peace, the business advantages that come with uniting our families." "And you don't want that?" "I don't want to be sold like cattle to secure a peace treaty." I looked up from bandaging her forehead. "Then why are you going through with it?" "Because I don't have a choice. Because Vincent made it clear that if I don't cooperate, people I care about will suffer." There was something in her voice, a pain that went beyond physical injuries. "What people?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, then, "There's someone Vincent doesn't know about. Someone who would be collateral damage if I don't play my part." "You're in love with someone else?" "Yes." The simple word hung between us, heavy with all the complications love brought to lives like ours. "Does Marco know?" I asked. "Marco doesn't care. This is business for him. A way to consolidate power and eliminate threats." Catherine winced as I adjusted the splint on her arm. "He told me he understood that our marriage would be purely political, that we'd both be free to maintain other relationships." The words hit me like bullets. Marco had planned it all out, hadn't he? Marriage to Catherine for business, me on the side for love, the perfect arrangement that gave him everything he wanted while asking me to accept scraps. "He mentioned you once," Catherine said quietly. "What did he say?" "That there was someone he cared about, someone who mattered to him more than the alliance, more than anything, but that he couldn't choose you over the family, over the peace this marriage would bring." "And what did you think about that?" Catherine's smile was sad, knowing, "I thought he was a fool for letting you go." I secured the last piece of tape around her bandages, my hands steadier than they should have been given the circumstances. "There," I said. "That arm needs to be x-rayed and properly set, but this will hold until you can get to a real doctor. Thank you." Catherine started to reach into her purse, but I stopped her. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? For Marco to realize he'd made a mistake and come crawling back? "I want to understand something," I said finally. "Why come to me? You could have gone to any hospital, spun some story about a car accident or a fall down the stairs. Why risk coming here?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "Because you're the only person I know who's been where I am. I've never been engaged to Marco." "No, but you've been trapped by loving someone you can't have. Someone whose world has rules that don't leave room for what you need." She was right, and the recognition was painful. "The difference is," Catherine continued, "you were brave enough to walk away. That wasn't bravery. That was self-preservation. Sometimes they're the same thing." As I helped her to the door, Catherine paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "What?" "If Marco called you right now, if he told you he'd chosen you, that he was ending the engagement and walking away from the alliance, what would you say?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd been asking myself the same thing for 3 weeks, lying awake at night imagining that exact scenario. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I think you do know. I think you're just afraid of the answer." After she left, I stood in my empty apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of choices made and unmade. Catherine was right. I did know what I'd say if Marco came back. The knowledge sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and undeniable. I'd say yes, despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation and broken promises. I'd say yes, because walking away from him had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I wasn't sure I was strong enough to do it again. But he wasn't going to call. Wasn't going to choose me over the alliance that would end decades of bloodshed and secure his family's future. And maybe that was for the best. Maybe some kinds of love were too dangerous, too consuming, too willing to destroy everything else in their path. Maybe walking away had been the right choice, even if it felt like dying a little every day. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. For a wild moment, my heart leaped, thinking it might be Marco. Instead, it was a text from the free clinic asking if I could cover an overnight shift. Real life. Honest work, a future that belonged to me alone. Texted back my acceptance and started getting ready for another night of treating the kinds of wounds that could actually be healed. It wasn't the life I'd imagined 6 months ago, when I'd thought Marco and I would face everything together, but it was a life I could live with. And sometimes, that had to be enough. The explosion lit up the night sky like a second sun. I was walking home from my shift at the free clinic when the shockwave hit, rattling windows 3 blocks away and setting off car alarms in a symphony of chaos. The sound came after. A deep, rolling boom that I felt in my bones. I knew. Even before I saw the smoke rising in the distance, even before the sirens started wailing through the streets. I knew exactly what had happened and where. Marco's restaurant. The one where he conducted business, where he held court like some modern-day prince. The place I'd eaten dinner a dozen times, watching him work the room with that dangerous charm that had first drawn me in. Someone had just declared war. My phone was buzzing before I'd even processed the full implications. "Tony's number, Elena." His voice was rough, strained. "We need you." "Is Marco—" "He's alive, barely. Can you meet us at the warehouse?" The warehouse, the place where I'd first truly understood what it meant to be part of Marco's world, where I'd saved a man's life while bullets flew outside. "I'm on my way." I commandeered a taxi, promising the driver double fare to ignore traffic laws and get me across town as fast as possible. Through the back window, I could see the orange glow of flames still reaching toward the sky, the scattered lights of emergency vehicles converging on what was left of Marco's empire. The warehouse looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago. Concrete and shadows and the smell of diesel fuel. But this time there were twice as many men, all of them armed, all of them watching the entrances like they expected Vincent Torino to come charging through the doors at any moment. Marco was on the same makeshift table where I'd operated before, conscious but barely. Burns covered his arms and face, and I could see the telltale signs of smoke inhalation in the way he was breathing. Elena. His voice was a whisper, raw from smoke and pain. Don't talk, I said, pulling on gloves with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. Tony, what happened? Bomb in the restaurant's kitchen. Marco was in his office when it went off. That's the only reason he's still breathing. I ran my hands over Marco's body, checking for injuries beyond the obvious burns. No broken bones, no internal bleeding that I could detect, but the burns were bad. 2nd degree across his arms and chest, 1st degree on his face. He needs a hospital, I said. No hospitals. The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see Vincent Torino himself standing in the warehouse doorway. Vincent. Tony's hand moved to his gun, but Vincent held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm not here to fight, Vincent said. I'm here to talk. Talk? Tony's voice was full of rage. You just tried to kill our boss. No, Vincent said, moving into the light. I didn't. I continued working on Marco's burns while the two men faced off, cleaning the wounds and applying topical antibiotics. But I was listening to every word. The bomb wasn't mine, Vincent continued. If I wanted Marco dead, he'd be dead. This was sloppy amateur hour. Then who? Someone who benefits from us being at war. Someone who doesn't want the alliance. Marco struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his burns. Catherine, he managed to say. What about Catherine? I asked. She's missing, Vincent said, his face grim. Has been since yesterday morning. I thought about the young woman who'd shown up at my door 3 weeks ago, bleeding and desperate. The woman who'd told me she was being forced into a marriage she didn't want. That she had someone she cared about who would become collateral damage if she didn't comply. Vincent, I said, not looking up from Marco's injuries. What happens to Catherine if she refuses to go through with the marriage? Vincent's silence was answer enough. And what happens to the person she's protecting if she cooperates? How did you... Vincent started, then stopped. What do you know about Catherine's situation? I know she came to me for help. I know she's terrified of you, and I know she's not going to marry Marco, no matter what you threaten her with. She has to. The alliance depends on it. Does it? I finally looked up, meeting Vincent's eyes directly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like someone just tried to start a war to prevent that alliance from happening. Someone who knows that the marriage is the keystone holding the whole piece together. Understanding dawned in Vincent's face. Catherine. She's not missing, I said. She's running. And she took out the restaurant to make sure no one could force her to come back. Marco's hand found mine, his fingers weak but determined. The chapel, he whispered. What chapel? St. Anthony's, where her grandmother is buried. She goes there when she needs to think. Vincent was already pulling out his phone, barking orders to his men. Within minutes, the warehouse was emptying as soldiers from both families mobilized to find Catherine before she could disappear completely. I have to go, Vincent said to me. But Elena, thank you for saving him, for figuring this out. I owe you. After he left, it was just me and Marco, and the smell of antiseptic in the empty warehouse. You came, Marco said, his voice still rough but stronger now. Tony called. I stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. You could have ignored him, could have let me burn. Is that what you think of me? Marco's smile was pained but genuine. I think you're the best person I've ever known. And I think I'm the luckiest bastard alive that you still give a damn about me. Marco, I know. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I lied to you, manipulated the situation, tried to have everything without considering what it cost you. I finished bandaging his arms, my movements careful and professional. And I was wrong. About all of it. What are you saying? Marco struggled to sit up, his gray eyes finding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I'm saying that if Catherine doesn't want to marry me, and clearly she doesn't, then there's no alliance to protect. No political marriage to sacrifice everything for, Vincent. We'll find another way to make peace. Maybe. But that's not my problem anymore. Marco reached for my hand with fingers that were steadier now. My only problem is figuring out how to convince the woman I love to give me another chance. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marco, I choose you, Elena. I should have chosen you 6 months ago, but I'm choosing you now. No conditions, no complications, no divided loyalties. Just you. I stared at him. This man who'd turned my world upside down so many times I'd lost count. The smart thing would be to walk away again, to protect myself from another round of heartbreak and manipulation. But looking at him now, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the absolute certainty in his voice, I realized something had changed. Not just in him, but in me. What about your family? I asked. Your business? The empire you've spent your whole life building? What about it? You'd really walk away from all of that? For me? Marco's smile was soft, genuine. Elena, I've spent the last 3 weeks trying to convince myself that the alliance was worth more than what we had. That duty and family loyalty trumped love, and then someone tried to blow me up. And the only thing I could think about was that I might die without ever telling you that you were right to walk away. That you deserved better than what I was offering. Tears were starting to blur my vision, but I blinked them back. And now? Now I know that none of it matters without you. The business, the power, the respect. It's all just empty theater if I don't have someone to share it with. Someone who sees the man underneath all the complications. What if the man underneath isn't worth saving? Then you'll save him anyway, Marco said with absolute confidence. Because that's who you are. That's what you do. He was right, and the recognition was both terrifying and liberating. This is insane, I said. The best things usually are. We've tried this before. It didn't end well. We've never tried this before, Marco corrected. Before, I was trying to manage you, protect you, control the situation. This time I'm just asking you to be my partner. Really my partner. Equal stakes, equal say, equal risk. Equal risk? Elena, if you come back to me, there's no halfway. No protected status, no carefully managed distance from the ugly parts of what I do. You'll be in it completely, and that means people will see you as a target. And you're okay with that? I'm terrified of it, but I'm more terrified of living without you. The honesty in his voice was devastating. I could see the fear in his eyes. The knowledge that bringing me fully into his world meant exposing me to dangers I'd only glimpsed before. What about my nursing license? I asked. My career? We'll figure it out. Together. Maybe you set up a clinic that serves people like Catherine. People who can't go to regular hospitals. Maybe you become the unofficial medical staff for every family in the city who needs someone they can trust. That's not exactly a traditional career path. Nothing about our life. Together is going to be traditional. He was right about that. But looking at him now, seeing the man who'd been willing to sacrifice everything for duty, finally choose love instead, I realized that traditional had never been what I wanted anyway. If we do this, I said, if we really try this time, there are conditions. Name them. No more lies. Even small ones. Even lies you think will protect me. I need to know what's happening, what we're facing, what the risks are. Agreed. No more making decisions about my life without consulting me. If someone's threatening me, I want to know. If you're planning something that affects us both, I'm part of the planning. Done. And Marco, if you ever put me in a position where I have to choose between you and my principles again, I'll choose my principles. Every time. Marco's smile was brilliant, transforming his burned and bandaged face completely. I wouldn't expect anything less. Then yes, I said, the word coming out stronger than I'd expected. Yes, I'll try this again. With you. Together. Marco pulled me down to him, his lips finding mine in a kiss that tasted of smoke and promises and new beginnings. When we broke apart, I could see tears in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered against my lips. Don't thank me yet. Ask me again in a year when you're tired of having your decisions questioned by your girlfriend. Girlfriend? Marco's eyebrow rose. Elena, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. All the way. Before I could ask what he meant, he was reaching into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that looked suspiciously familiar. Marco, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. He opened the box, revealing his mother's ring, the simple band with the small diamond that he'd shown me months ago. Elena Rossi, will you marry me? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with everything we'd been through, everything we'd lost and found and chosen to fight for. Are you asking me to marry you in a warehouse while you're covered in burns from a bomb blast? I'm asking you to marry me in the place where I first realized you were brave enough to be my partner. The place where you saved my man's life while bullets were flying. The place where you chose to be part of this world, even when it was dangerous and scary and completely insane. Marco. This is who we are, Elena. This is our story. Not white dresses and church ceremonies, but midnight emergencies and impossible choices and loving each other enough to risk everything. He was right. This was our story, messy and dangerous and completely unconventional. But it was ours. Yes, I said, the word coming out as barely a whisper. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. In a warehouse, in a church, in the middle of a war zone. I don't care where, as long as it's with you. Marco's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me all along. I love you, Elena Santangelo, he said. I love you too, Marco. But I'm keeping my name. Wouldn't have it any other way. As we sat there in the warehouse, surrounded by the ghosts of all our mistakes and the promise of everything we might build together, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. The ring on my finger caught the light, simple and beautiful and real. Like the life we were choosing to build, despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. Outside, the city was still dealing with the aftermath of the explosion, but inside our bubble of antiseptic and promises, everything felt possible. What happens now? I asked, the question taking on new meaning for what felt like the 100th time. Now we go home, Marco said, and we start planning our wedding. What about Catherine? Vincent? The Alliance? What about them? Catherine's free to love whoever she wants. Vincent will find another way to make peace, and we'll figure out how to run this business together. Together. Together, he confirmed. From now on, everything we do as partners. Even the dangerous stuff. Especially the dangerous stuff. I helped Marco to his feet, supporting him as we walked toward the warehouse entrance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new ways for the world to test our resolve. But tonight, for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever it was, we'd face it together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.